Hello. If you're watching this video, it's because somehow you've stumbled on it by sheer accident, lucky you, or you have been curious perhaps about some other stuff I might have put out there around my very weird, twisty turny, possibly ADHD, definitely woman of a certain age, currently 47, slash empath, slash just general chaotic inner world journey. I have felt inspired to put some things out there to share kind of how I am. And I'm going to give you some of the detail around why that's happened in this video. What you can see, that you may already have seen, is a set of smaller videos that just give updates on where I am at this journey as I go along. So, as I said before, I'm 47 years old. I have had a business for around 9 years. Not honestly, not been as successful as I wanted it to be, but that's probably because of the chaos, and also external circumstances like COVID, etc. And I'm in a weird place right now. So I recently decided, after 2 years of being curious about whether this is a possibility, have decided to try and get a referral for ADHD. That has never been something that's been in my world until around about 2 years ago, and it was suggested to me that I might be ADHD. And at first I was like, what? What are you talking about? And then I looked into it a bit more and I thought, actually, that kind of makes sense. And then I looked into it some more and I thought, oh, heck, there's some light bulbs going off there as regards what's happened in my entire life from childhood and why I am the way I am, why I've had some of the challenges I've had over the years. And as time's gone by, I've gone from thinking, I don't need to diagnose this, it's fine because I am what I am, it's not going to change anything, to maybe I do need a little bit of help with this, to okay, now things have come to a head. And that's where I'm at now. And in fact, last week I had some real low I've had a lot of low moments recently, I must admit. And I now understand that is probably in part due to not only the fact that I am carrying a lot of all of the weight in my life as regards the emotional, labor, the financial labor, the practical labor. Being a single woman, I have to carry all of that on my own. It's not only because of that, but because what I now realise is probably, or potentially, if I am ADHD, a dopamine deficiency. What I've experienced very much in my adult life in general is I think I'm okay a lot of the time, and then a small thing will happen and it will push me off the edge, and I will hit a spiral of sorry, traffic in the background that you might be able to hear. I will hit this spiral of self-doubt, and I'll feel things extremely intensely, and that luckily goes to positive emotions as well. I feel everything at like 11 out of 10, Spinal Tap level, if you're old enough to remember that reference. So here I am, on the 16th of June 2025, waiting for what might be the next steps, hopefully, in whether I get a referral process. I have no idea how long the process will take, to even be considered, to be seen, and what will happen after that. But the more research I do around this stuff, the more I realise that there are so many things that I've encountered and still encounter that make so much sense to me now under the heading of ADHD. Now, one of the things I'm really, really quite resistant to is the idea that ADHD is treated as a disorder in the medical world, and I can understand why that is, because that's the way the system's built ultimately. But I also do really believe that there is a genetic thing that's happened to us as a species that's allowed us to thrive and survive and that whatever the genes are that are responsible for ADHD, that is absolutely one of the things that's helped us be successful. And there is a lot of research around that now, which I found fascinating. I've got a couple of references on that. One of them off the top of my head was, well, the first time I heard of this idea was on an Instagram account called Ancestral Habits. They've got some research on there that they've collated from other sources. So that's quite interesting in itself. So I'm in this place now. I'm a little bit nervous even about talking about it to some people, because I'm also really conscious of the fact that it's, it could be seen as, ooh, trendy, let's talk about ADHD now. There are an awful lot of women in the same sort of age group as me who are suddenly discovering that this could be a possibility in their lives, or getting diagnosed in waves. We never used to talk about this 10 years ago for women, particularly that, when I was at school, ADHD was a naughty boy disorder, and only boys got it, and I think it's particularly prevalent now to see women of my sort of age getting diagnosed, because we struggle to mask, when our hormones start to change and lots of other things increase, like anxiety and so on. It's really, really hard to continue to mask that. But do you know what? Actually, part of it is, I think sometimes we all of us just get to an age where we're like, do you know what? Fuck this pretending, fuck this making ourselves acceptable and appealing to other people in whatever context. I'm just sick of having to be squeezed into a box, and so that very much appeals to my whole rebel ethos. So what are the things that that made me start to seriously consider that I might be ADHD? So I started to realize that there were some experiences from when I was at school that were really poignant. One of the things was that I often, no matter what age I was at, or what stage I was at, or what subject it was, I always felt somehow disconnected. So I think I had an awareness that I was pretty clever. Like, I knew that I had a good brain in my head, and that I was, I was intelligent to, a pretty good degree. But regardless of that, I always felt somehow out of my depth. And it was either that or an extreme opposite. So let me explain. So one of the things was, so certain subjects perhaps that you would consider more academically traditional, like maths and so on, and science, where I felt behind and I felt like, oh my God, this is like so much data, I can't deal with it. When I was at primary school, I ended up having to take home some maths units in the summer to catch up to the rest of the people in my year. And what I now realise was, rather than thinking I'm bad at maths, which was a belief I had for most of my life, it was actually that it took me longer to get there, and I needed to check and double check that I was right. So I struggled with things like that, things with lots and lots of data and facts and so on. But then there were also subjects that I just was so frustrated by, because I didn't feel like we were talking about the right things. We were getting under the surface of the right things. So, for example, history, religious studies, or religious education, as I think it was at the time, RE, and English, and things like English literature and things like that. We were just reeling off dates and facts and looking at things on a very surface level. And I was like, particularly history, for example, I was like, hey, wait a minute, hang on a minute. Why are we learning about when this specific battle happened or this specific event happened, and not talking about how people actually felt and experienced that, how it shaped society, how the people in these events actually experience them. And I would get so frustrated that we were floating on the surface of things, and I just permanently felt lost, and like I was missing something all the time. And in fact, when I did my A-level English Lit, one of the teachers actually said to my parents that I had had insight about some of the texts that we studied that were things that he'd never even considered, that were so insightful that they were kind of a little bit mind-blowing, and something that he'd never in all his years encountered is a discussion. The challenge I had though was that I had all of this stuff going on in my head around insights, and it really fired me up. I couldn't put that in a logical essay. I would just basically mind map my thoughts out in a big long, few pages of stuff as it happened in my head, try to somehow capture it. And I seem to remember doing kind of mind maps to try and prepare for writing an essay, and rather than putting it in a logical order or argument, I would just basically splash all my thoughts on a page, and I would just pick them in order and write them down in order of what was on the page. And I just couldn't get my head around the idea of doing a logical essay. So I had to work really hard on that, and actually I'm quite good at doing that kind of thing now, because a large part of my career is involved putting things in a way that people can assimilate and that makes sense, especially when it comes to designing training programs and coaching programs and so on. So I'm actually very good at that now, but it takes work. So some of those things are, have really made me reflect. One of the other things that's quite interesting is, and this was something that someone introduced me to, an idea. I can't remember who it was. I'll tag in if I remember. This idea that actually there seems to be almost a crossover between ADHD and those who have empath experiences. I did see something the other day actually that could explain this, around how ADHD people tend to be very, very good at reading people because we're very good at picking up cues, subtle cues from people around us. Now, I do think there is a correlation, at least, between some people with ADHD and some people with empath tendencies, that there's almost like a crossover, like if you imagine a Venn diagram, that there's this space in the middle whereby we're having spicy experiences of the world, and we're also very much experiencing other people's world as well at the same time, and that is so incredibly intense. It's a beautiful gift, and I never want to take that away, because it is the thing that is the most fundamental part of the work that I do, to the point where it freaks people out sometimes. It freaks me out sometimes, but it is also a really heavy weight to carry, because I'm feeling my own feelings to 11 out of 10, and I'm feeling everyone else's feelings to 11 out of 10. And there are times where I can't be in busy places because it's just too much. So there have been years gone by where around Christmas time I've had to just lock myself away a little bit, because shops and other public places are so busy that I just can't. I pick up lint, emotional lint from people. I've had to get my head around doing a lot of work in London recently, because London for me was a nightmare, an absolute living hell. And I would often come back from a day in London feeling like I had the flu. And I've had to build my defenses and change my mindset around it, because otherwise I would have been permanently exhausted in the last sort of 6 to 12 months with the work that I've had to do there. But London for me was just so chaotic and so peoply that it was too intense for a lot of the time. And I love people. I am fascinated by people. I am deeply, deeply intrigued by everything that goes on inside us and how we present that outside of us. But I also get really exhausted by people really quick. So this crossover between the ADHD thing and the empath thing, I think, is quite interesting. I might have to elaborate on another time. So there's all that kind of stuff. There's also things from when I was a child where, and I still do, I have very specific requirements around my environmental factors, and that includes being very temperature sensitive and being very obsessed with having the right clothing, footwear, and all of that. Packing is a nightmare for me. Even if I've got an overnight bag that I just take on a regular basis, that's, you know, a real simple work night away, it just gives me the anxiety. So there's all of that. There's literally what is in my environment and whether that gives me headspace to be able to do what I need to do. And right down to fabrics. So when I was little, I wouldn't wear jumpers most of the time because I was obsessed with them being itchy. My pillowcases have to be so soft, like they've been, you know, the softest cotton that's been washed for 30 years, like every day, kind of soft. So I have to buy very specific types of bedding so that I can feel I can feel comfortable. I'm also never comfortable. So for more than 5 seconds, right? So I could be sat on my sofa. My sofa is really comfy and I love it, but I can't keep still for more than 5 seconds. I often go to the cinema on my own because I know that I'm going to fidget. I often fall asleep by moving my foot around. My body doesn't seem, and when I think back to being a child, even my body's never quite felt right somehow. Like I feel like I don't belong in a human container. That's the best way I can describe it. I am never comfortable for very long. I'm just literally seconds, and there will be times where I'm so conscious of fidgeting about a lot that I will just sit next to somebody in a feeling very, very uncomfortable, not moving for ages, despite the fact I'm either uncomfortable or even, verging on pain, because I just don't want to be annoying and fidgety. And I'll wait it out and I'll wait out for as long as I can, and then I'm going to have to move. So, yeah, all sorts of weird things. And then I heard something the other day on a podcast that someone who started to take medication would suddenly realize that they had space between the input and the output in their brain. The idea that there even is space between those things, to me, was unbelievable. I didn't know that that was a thing that people had, space between the input and the output. Not only that, I didn't know that there wasn't, on a normal 24/7 basis, and I mean even when you're asleep, I didn't know that there wasn't many input channels and many output channels happening simultaneously, overlapped and entangled all the time. I didn't know that it was possible to not experience that. Now, I know from a human perspective we do, the way we process the world, actually subconsciously we're all getting lots and lots of channels in and lots of channels out. But if you think about it as, the sort of classic analogy of the tabs being open on your internet browser, my goodness, I've got so many tabs open, and it's like looking at all of the tabs all at the same time. And so I get very, very severe overwhelm. There is rarely a moment that goes by that I'm not overwhelmed. And how I manage that, if I'm honest, I don't know. There are a number of strategies I try, and I will perhaps talk more about this in other videos, but yeah, overwhelm is almost a permanent state for me, and that is heavy. It makes me emotional thinking about it, because that is probably one of the biggest challenges in my whole life. And what that means is my life isn't in the place that I want it to be right now. My business isn't where I want it to be. My personal life isn't where I want it to be. And a lot of that is because there's so much traffic going on all the time in my mind, and I'm not good at consistency. There are some things that I'm very specific about. some practical things that I'm extremely specific about and very repeated about. But there are things like forming habits and so on. Or let's say, you know, I wanted to get more exercise or eat certain ways, or adopt frameworks and organizational strategies in my business and in my work. I find that really hard. So that's just a small flavor of the things that have led up to me thinking, maybe there's something going on here. I know this is a long video. If you're still here with me, I'm guessing that's because either you're maybe experiencing something yourself, or you know somebody that you want to try and understand better. The same, you know, the old thing is true that, you know, we say when you've met one ADHD person, you've met one ADHD person. So of course we're all very different. But maybe there are some things that are resonating for you here, and if there are, I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to be in touch, or to see comments or whatever. But yeah, that's me winging it, putting it out there. And you know, I do a lot of my best work just winging it. None of this was scripted, none of this was pre-thought. I just pressed record and did, you know, talked about what was there in my brain as a stream of consciousness. And that actually is how a lot of my life goes. And it works well most of the time, actually. So that's me right now. I wonder what will happen next. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here with me on this. And please reach out if something resonates, or you think there's something I can do to help you get out of that echo chamber of your head, because I know that can sometimes be an unhelpful place to be. Lots of love. Chief Rebel out.